2021 meeting of the Lawrence Board of Zoning Appeals. Before we get started, I'll ask staff to give us the rules of the road for the conduct of this meeting.
Thank you very much. My name is Kyle Kobe, and I'll be facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting. Joining me live from the City Commission room is Catherine Weeks, Staff Liaison. We will work alongside the Chair, who's on remote video, to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the City's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. This will make it easier for everyone to hear the meeting. Just remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon located next to the microphone icon. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on for the duration. If you are participating by phone, you can enter *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Somewhere on your Zoom screen, you will also see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all of the meeting participants. Board members, you must state your name and title each time you speak. Members of city staff must also state their name and title each time they speak. I'll also ask that applicants and members of the public identify themselves each time before they speak to ensure that everyone is able to follow along. Public comment is sought on an item. Individuals participating via Zoom should use the Raise Your Hand feature. Windows and Mac users can access this feature through the Participants button at the bottom of their screen. Android and iPhone users can access this feature through the More button located at the bottom right corner of their screen. For those calling in by phone, you may dial *9. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The Chair will then call for in-person public comment for those who are physically present. Staff will direct you to the podium to speak while following social distancing and safety protocols. All motions need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, staff will call on each board member individually to provide their vote. Staff will then announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. I want to again remind everyone to please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and I'll now turn the meeting back over to the Chair.
Thank you, Kurt. Looking at our agenda, let's start with a roll call.
Catherine Weeks, Staff Liaison. I'll go ahead and call the roll. Clark.
Present.
Falvey.
Present.
Gardner.
Here.
Herod.
Here.
Rankin.
Here.
Shalinski.
Here.
Weissner.
Here.
And we have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Chairperson Herod. We'll move on to communications. Are there any communications to come before the board?
We do have one communication that did not make it into your packet. It is a letter from the neighbor of item number 1 at 1124 Waverly Drive. The neighbor's last name is Whipple, and they did send a letter of support in for the project, and that did not have time to make it into your packet.
All right, very good. This is Chairperson Herod, are there any disclosures of ex parte communications or any abstentions from the agenda tonight? All right, seeing none. Are there any agenda items that are going to be deferred this evening?
There are no items to be deferred this evening.
All right, very well. This is Chairperson Herron. Then I think we'll move on to the first item of business we have tonight, which looks to be B-21-00053, which is a request for a variance of our land development code regarding the property at 1124 Waverly Drive. I'd ask staff to please present for us.
Okay, good evening, board members. Catherine Weeks, Staff Liaison. Item number 1 on tonight's agenda is a request for a variance to reduce the required rear yard setback for a lot in the RS7 zoning district for an existing detached dwelling from 30 feet to 19 feet. The property is located at 1124 Waverly Drive. The subject property was originally platted and recorded in 2004 as Block 4, Lot 8, part of the Fox Chase South final plat. The subject parcel came into existence under the 1966 zoning code and was zoned RS2, which is also single-family residential. The 1966 Lawrence zoning code, adopted with ordinance number 3500, required a 30-foot yard building setback, rear yard setback for structures in that RS2 district. The 1966 zoning code also contained a rear yard exemption and modifications for certain zoning districts. Section 2015-04C states that in the RS1, RS2, and RMD districts, a principal building may be located no closer than 20 feet to the nearest property line opposite the front lot line, provided that the rear yard area is no less than 30% of the total lot area. The existing deck was built approximately 20 feet from that rear property line at its furthest point. The subject property has a rear yard that amounts for approximately 31% of the total lot area, and therefore this subject property would have complied with that exemption 2015-04 in the 1966 zoning code. So no variance would have been required when the deck was constructed. Criteria 1 considers uniqueness and actions of the property owner or the applicant. So the rear yard area exemption was not included in the 2006 Land Development Code, which is the code that we're under today. The required rear yard setback for the RS7 district, which this zone converted to, is still 30 feet. The applicant is not looking to place the structure closer to the rear property line. Rather, they are looking to continue to utilize the previously approved setback and footprint of the existing deck. The rebuilt deck will be located at the same distance from the rear property line, but within the required 30-foot rear setback. If the 1966 zoning code exemption existed within this current land development code, a variance would not have been required. The house is currently located approximately 32 feet from the property line, so it would not permit a deck at all if it were not to encroach into the setback. The proposed deck replacement will not encumber the required 5-foot interior side lot lines, or side setbacks, or an existing platted 15-foot utility easement along the rear of the property. The removal of the required rear setback exemption from the Land Development Code is not a condition that was brought about by the applicant. The subject property and the ownership remained the same when the zoning code and density and dimensional standards changed. In criteria 2, we consider whether there will be adverse impacts upon the rights of adjacent property owners. Staff does not believe that granting the requested variance would result in the restriction or removal of the adjacent property owner's rights. Adjacent properties will continue to be able to operate at their code-compliant uses as detached dwellings. Again, one adjacent property owner has sent in a letter of support. Criteria 3 considers the potential or infliction of an unnecessary hardship on the owner or applicant. The deck came into existence legally under the previous zoning code that permitted placement within the required rear yard setback. The current Land Development Code's density and dimensional standards would not permit an elevated deck deeper than several feet. Since their construction, the existing deck and residence have remained the same. The zoning code and density and dimensional standard requirements have changed. Requiring the subject property to comply with existing standards would not allow for a deck replacement or continued use of the previously permitted setback and may constitute a hardship upon the property owner. The property owners would be deprived of rights associated with property ownership that was granted them under previous regulations. Criteria 4 considers the potential for adverse effects on the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. In staff's opinion, granting the requested variance will not create an adverse effect upon the previously listed items. The request in question is contained within this parcel owned by the applicants and will not result in noxious or adverse effects. Criteria 5 considers the general spirit and intent of the code. The intent of a variance is not to grant additional rights to a particular property, but instead it is to equalize the rights of properties in instances when one property has lesser rights in context to a particular aspect of the Land Development Code. A variance is not an escape clause from standards and requirements placed in the Land Development Code that apply to all forms and development within the community. Granting the setback variance would not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the Land Development Code. Granting the requested variance is consistent with previous findings of similar context by the board and is also consistent with the spirit of Land Development Code. Granting the request would permit the continued use of the previously permitted deck. The deck came into existence legally, and the applicant is looking to continue to utilize the depth and footprint as it was constructed originally. So I believe the property owner and their representative is here tonight, and if they have questions, they'd be happy to. I'd be happy to stand for any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Catherine. Does the board have any questions for Catherine or staff? All right, I'm not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to address the board? I see, this is Chairperson Herod. I see Mr. Schwabauer. Go ahead, you can unmute yourself and.
We are not the original owners of the property. We're unaware of the variance change. The deck is in a state of repair, and we requested of a lot of the wood rot that's occurred. So it became apparent that we needed to replace this deck as it's become rather dangerous. We have grandchildren, and we have an 85-year-old father who lives with us who's handicapped. So, and he enjoys setting out on the deck. So it became apparent that we needed to replace it, and it's become worse over time.
All right. Is there any questions for Mr. This is Chairperson Herod. Is there any questions for Mr. Schwabauer? All right, I don't see any questions. Is there think staff said that Mr. Schwabauer had a representative that was here tonight? Is there anything more we want to hear from the applicant, or the applicant wants to advise the board?
That would be David Morales.
All right, hearing nothing, be looking for a motion to end the, well, I'd be looking, is there anybody is there anybody in the council chamber, anybody else on the Zoom video that wishes to address the board on this issue?
Kyle Kobe with Planning. I do not see any digital hands being raised in my participant screen, and there is nobody in the City Commission chambers with us here tonight.
All right, very well. This is Chairperson Herod. So at this time, I'd be looking for a motion to end public comment on this issue. I see General Gardner has his hand up.
Board Member Gardner, motion to move to
close public
board.
Comment.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second to Board Member Gardner's motion?
Board Member Falvey, I'll second that motion.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to end public comment. I'd ask staff to call the roll.
Hold on a second.
Catherine Week, Staff Liaison. Clark,
Aye.
Falvey,
Aye.
Gardner,
Aye.
Herod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Weisner. I think I heard an aye. Was that an aye?
Aye, yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right. This is Chairperson Herod. Thank you, Catherine. All right. Any discussion by the board on this agenda item?
Board Member Gardner, staff did a good job. It covers all 5 conditions that they found to be covered. So if somebody else wants to move to approve the variance, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll make a motion to do it.
I will go ahead and buy Board Member Gardner's motion. This is Chairperson Herod, and look for a second unless there's an objection.
Well, I'll read the motion. It's
All right, go ahead.
Move to approve the rear yard setback from 30 to 19 feet for the deck replacement at 1124 Waverly Drive, based on the staff's finding that it meets all 5 conditions of section 201309G in the Land Development Code.
All right. This is Chairperson Herod. It's been moved by Board Member Gardner to accept staff's recommendations regarding this agenda item. Is there a second?
This is Eric Weisner. I second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. This is Chairperson Herod. I'd ask staff to call the roll.
Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Clark,
Aye.
Falvey,
Aye.
Gardner,
Aye.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Weisner.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, very good. This is Chairperson Harrod. We'll move on to our second agenda item tonight. And I believe this is for item B-21-00054, which is a variance for the property at 5527 Chamney Court. And I would ask staff to report to the board on this issue.
All right, good evening again. Item number 2, Catherine Week, Staff Liaison. Item number 2 on tonight's agenda is a request for a variance to reduce the required rear yard setback for a lot in the RS7 district for an existing detached dwelling from 30 feet to 25.5 feet, or 25 and a half. Oh, I'm sorry, 25.5, not 25 and a half. The property is located at 5527 Chamney Court in West Lawrence. The subject property was platted and recorded in 2006 as Block 2, Lot 28, Fox Chase South, Number 3. The subject lot came into existence under the 1966 zoning code. The subject property satisfied the density and dimensional requirements required for a lot in an RS2 district, which is what the district was zoned under that code. Upon the adoption of the current land development code in 2006, the subject property was rezoned to the RS7 residential district, and both the RS2 and the RS7 districts, as mentioned, require a 30-foot rear setback. The existing detached dwelling was constructed in 2012 under the current land development code. The existing covered and attached patio space is unenclosed and unconditioned. However, the land development code considers improvements that are attached to a principal structure to be part of the principal structure. When the covered patio's roof was connected to the detached dwelling became non-conforming as a portion of it was encumbering the rear setback. No variance would be required for an uncovered surface-level patio within the setback. The distinguishing difference here is that this is attached to the house and covered. Even though the subject property was platted under the previous zoning code, the existing detached dwelling came into existence under the current land development code, and it was subject to the density and dimensional standards as expressed by Section 2601 of the code. Additionally, the existing detached dwelling could not benefit from the previous code's rear setback exemption as noted in Section 2015-04C of the 1966 zoning code and the previous agenda item. At no point during its existence could the existing detached dwelling have encumbered any point of any portion of the rear setback. Criteria 1, considering uniqueness and actions of the property owner or applicant. As noted above, the subject property satisfied the density and dimensional standards for a lot in an RS2 zoning district. It would be considered a pie-shaped lot and is not dissimilar to adjacent pie-shaped lots on Chamney Court and Warren Court in both land area and shape. The existing land use, detached dwelling, is permitted in the R7 district, and there are no unique factors related to platting or zoning which would necessitate the proposed variance. In this instance, the request for a variance is induced by the homeowner. The action to structurally attach via a roof a covered patio to the detached dwelling was, I should say not the decision of this homeowner. The action to structurally attach via a roof a covered patio to the detached dwelling was the decision of a previous property owner. Based on aerial imagery, staff believes the covered patio was constructed and attached at the time of principal structure construction or shortly thereafter. The approved building permit does not indicate that there is an attached covered patio. No subsequent building permits were approved for attached covered patio. These improvements were completed beyond the scope of the approved building permit and would not have been permitted by planning or development services staff or the regulations in the code. Criteria 2 considers the potential for adverse impact upon the rights of adjacent property owners. Staff does not believe that granting the requested variance result in the restriction or removal of adjacent property owners' rights. Adjacent properties will continue to operate their code-compliant uses in this instance. Between the time of writing this public hearing, writing the report and the public hearing, staff received 2 neighbor communications. Neither indicated support or opposition. They were simply inquiries asking for additional information on what the notice letter was for. Criteria 3 considers the potential for infliction of unnecessary hardship upon the owner or applicant. Bringing the existing attached covered patio into compliance with the required rear setback may certainly be a hardship in this case or inconvenience for the current property owners. However, it does not satisfy the Land Development Code's definition of an unnecessary hardship. The existing conforming use of the detached dwelling will still be maintained. The property owners will not be deprived of the rights associated with property ownership, and financial impacts of the code, financial impacts cannot be considered under the definition for unnecessary hardship. Criteria 4 considers the potential for adverse impact on public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. In staff's opinion, granting the requested variance will not create an adverse effect upon the previously listed items. The request in question is contained within that parcel owned by the applicant and will not result in noxious or adverse ill effects. Criteria 5 considers the general spirit and intent of the code. The intent of a variance is not to grant additional rights to a particular property, but instead it's to equalize the rights of properties in instances where one property has lesser rights in context to a particular aspect of the Land Development Code. A variance is also not an escape clause for standards and requirements placed in the Development Code that apply to all forms of development within the community. It is unfortunate that the current owners, who were not the owners at the time of construction, are experiencing the hardship and inconvenience of a non-conforming structure. When previous owners and contractors construct improvements beyond the scope of approved building permits, future owners are left to deal with the consequences. This process is intended to allow development of properties that is so unique to the code's restrictions that would make it impossible to develop otherwise. This process is not intended to memorialize setback errors that were committed during the lifetime of the current Land Development Code. And I believe the property owner is here and could answer questions if you have them, and I would also be happy to stand for any questions if you should have them.
This is Chairperson Herod. Thank you, Catherine. Are there any questions for staff?
Board Member Shalinski.
Hold on, Barry. Let's have Board Member Clark go.
This is Board Member Clark. Staff, could you just confirm, maybe I missed the year of construction when this was built?
Yeah, so this was, the building permit, I believe, was pulled in 2012. And
Okay.
I don't know if construction began in the beginning, or the end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013, but aerial images indicate that it went up between issuing the building permit and 2013, so.
And the final building permit was inspected and the certificate of occupancy was granted?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
This is Chairperson Herod. Board Member Shalinski, do you have a question for staff?
I do. I'm trying to make sure that I understand. The issue is that the patio cover is attached to the main structure. Is that correct?
That's correct. In this case, it is part of the main structure, yes.
So in other words, if there were, say, a 6-inch or a 1-foot gap between the main structure and the patio cover would be permitted?
If there were some physical separation, yes, between the two structures, it would be permitted. That's correct. If it didn't have a solid roof, for instance, if it was a pergola, well, it would be considered an accessory structure with a solid roof. If it was a pergola, it would just be a patio with a garden structure over it, and both would be permitted.
Okay, thank you.
This is Chairperson Harrod. Is there any other questions by the board for staff? Board Member Gardner. You're muted, Board Member Gardner.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't unmute. Board Member Gardner, there's mention in the staff report of detached dwellings, but that has nothing to do with the issue, correct?
No, that just goes to show that it is a use permitted in that zoning district when we analyze
Okay.
whether it's a plating or a zoning issue. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, General. This is Chairperson Harrod. Is there any other questions for staff? Seeing none, why don't we, is the applicant with us tonight to, does the applicant wish to present for the board?
I think that's Adam Turner.
Mr. Turner, we can't hear you right now.
Hi, sorry about that. Are you able to hear me okay now?
Yeah, go ahead and
Okay.
introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Adam Turner. I'm the property owner at 5527 Chamney Court. And we just wanted to let everybody know, like this whole process is new to us. We don't really understand like what all is happening. We just know that it's a problem, and we are just looking to try to get everything squared away and corrected.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Turner. This is Chairperson Harrod. Mr. Turner, do you mind if I ask you a few questions about your property?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. This is Chairperson Harrod. Mr. Turner, when was it that you bought the property?
We bought this house in October last year. So we've been here for about 7 months.
Okay, October 2020. And do you know, are you the second owner, third owner, fourth owner?
I believe we're the second owner of this house.
Okay, so you believe that you bought the house from the original owner?
Correct.
All right, and when you bought the house, did the original owner advise you that that attached deck was not in compliance with existing zoning?
No, they didn't advise us about that at all. And we actually brought that up to the realtor when we figured out this problem existed. And our realtor reached out to the other one just to let them know that this was a problem.
Right. How was it that this issue came to your attention?
Well, we had originally started doing some investigating to see if there was a way to enclose the patio that exists there right now, so that we can use it, block the wind, put a screen or something in. And then when we started doing the research for zoning, that's where we figured out that this problem happens, or this setback issue was even a thing. And so we were advised to begin the process for a variance, which I have been learning for the last couple of months.
All right, great. And just, I'm kind of taking a flyer on this one. This is Chairperson Harrod again. When, as part of buying your property in on or around October of 2020, did you have an inspector come in and take a look at things?
Correct. Part of the buying process, we had a home inspector come in, and they said everything was good to go.
Right. And this is Chairperson Harrod again. And circling back just quickly, you said that you had your realtor contact the realtor for the seller. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And your realtor advised the seller that, hey, there's a problem. This property that you sold us is not in compliance. At least part of the property isn't complying with the present zoning. Is that right?
That's correct. And that conversation happened about a month and a half or so ago when we initially figured out this problem. So it wasn't a conversation we had during the, buying and selling or the buying process of the house.
Let me ask you this. Was there any other response from the seller or the seller's realtor regarding this issue?
There was a response back, but I don't think it was, anything negative. I don't really remember. My wife did that correspondence. But I know nothing came of it, other than, hey, try to get a variance for that problem.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at, and this is Chairperson Harrod again, was, to your knowledge, was there any acknowledgement by the former owner, the seller, any acknowledgement that they knew about this issue?
No, there was no acknowledgement that they knew this issue existed.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there any, this is Chairperson Harrod, is there any other board member that has questions for Mr. Turner?
Board Member Gardner, not now, but, would we be able to ask him later if we need to?
Mr. Turner, would you be okay hanging around?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have some questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Is there any, this is Chairperson Harrod. Is there any other board member that wants to ask any questions from the applicant? Seeing none. Does the board have any problem with me inquiring of staff? No, seeing none. This is Chairperson Harrod. Catherine, Board Person Clark already asked you about this. And I want to make sure that I understand the broad strokes of things. So I think the packet that you've given us, it's reasonable to draw some presumptions, which is, so you've included the actual site plan for this property. Is that right?
I believe it's a plot plan. This Catherine Wake, staff liaison. I believe it's a plot plan. Kyle would probably be able to share the screen if you want. We do have the image where it shows the setback, the way the house is situated on the lot, and the actual building permit drawing.
And I'm looking, I mean, you can put that up on the screen. This is Chairperson Harrod. I'm looking at that cluster of 4 pictures on
Do that whole screen right
page 29 of your packet, page 4 of this particular agenda item.
If you can do, the whole, yeah.
All right, give me a second, everybody.
That's great. Thank you. This is Chairperson Harrod. So I'm looking down to the bottom right corner, and I see what's labeled as residential site plan.
Yes, so that would be the plot plan that went with the building permit.
All right. And then if staff will zoom out just a little bit, maybe so that we can see the top pictures. There we go. Awesome. And then up in the top left corner, we can see that GIS photo of, well, no, the GIS photo is the top right. And that GIS photo is from 2013, which is contemporaneous to the construction of the home. Is that right?
Catherine Wake, yes.
And so we believe, in fact, that this GIS picture from 2013 was taken very shortly after the construction of the home, right?
Catherine Wake, staff liaison, yes. Based on the condition of the lot neighboring and the lot itself, it looks like it's either at or near or shortly after what would be considered final or ready for occupancy.
Right. And then also over here on top left, we have the setback and where this attached structure is pushing into the setback, right?
Staff liaison, Catherine Wake, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so broadening our discussion a little bit, it's my understanding that before a certificate of occupancy is going to be handed over to the builder, seller, whoever, there's going to be a final building inspection. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so is it fair for us to presume that there was a final building inspection of this property in question?
Yes, there would have been, yes, before they could get an occupancy certificate.
And then following that logic, it's also fair to presume that after that final building inspection, a certificate of occupancy was granted by the city to the builder or owner or somebody, right?
Correct. Staff Liaison
And-
Catherine Week, that's correct.
And so then from that point on, the city has essentially put its imprimatur on this property. It's good to go, sell it, and here we are today. And I mean, that's of course a very, very broad brush sort of statement, but is that fair to say?
Staff Liaison Catherine Week, that is a fair scenario as to what could have happened, yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant or staff? And I need to get back to a tile view so I can actually see everybody. I can't see right now. Okay. Does anybody have a question for the applicant or staff? All right.
Board Member Gardner moved to close this portion and get to the discussion by the board.
All right. It's been moved to close public comment and get to the discussion by the board. Is there a second?
This is Board Member Clark. I'm not sure we've had public portion of the
Oh, you're
meeting.
right.
We've heard from the applicant, but not the public portion.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Clark. Is there anybody in the public that wants to comment on this issue before us?
Kyle Kobe with Planning. There's no one in the room to speak on this item, and I do not see any digital hands being raised.
All right. This is Chairperson Harrod, and thank you for that, Board Member Clark. So I think we can return back to Board Member Gardner's motion to close comment by the applicant, staff, and the public. And
I'll second it. This is Board Member Clark. Yeah.
all right. It's been moved and seconded. Could staff call the roll?
Staff Liaison Catherine Week, Clark,
Aye.
Falvey,
Aye.
Gardner,
Aye.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Weisner.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Does any board member wish to, this is Chairperson Harrod, does any board member wish to discuss the item at hand? And I see Board Member Gardner's hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board Member Gardner. I think it's worthwhile talking through the conditions. Number 2 and number 4, the staff found that number 2, it doesn't adversely affect the adjacent property rights, and number 4, it doesn't adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, and convenience and prosperity and general welfare. So we can put those aside. Would you guys agree?
This is Chairperson
I would
Harrod.
like
I
to,
agree.
thank you. I would like to take them one at a time and go back to number 1 then. I spent several hours yesterday and the day before doing real property searches and comparing shapes. There is no other shape like this in this community. There's no other lot that is this same area. Most of them are, over 1,000 square feet difference. The closest two were 221 square feet and 103 square feet. So I would argue that by shape and size, this property is unique. So that's my argument for number 1.
Does any other board member have any comment regarding, this is Chairperson Harrod, does any the board member have any comment regarding General Gardner's analysis of condition 1? All right, seeing none, General Gardner, you want to
Sure, thank you.
rolling?
Number 3, and it was really, the start of it was brought by Nate and then followed up by you significantly. But I want to make a couple of comments and then go to basically the most telling thing is that the city inspected and approved this house when it was constructed. Therefore, it would have met all the zoning restrictions. So now finding that it doesn't, creates a hardship, not only for this owner who has absolutely nothing to do with the thing before, but even the previous owner. If this owner was to have to remedy this, to me, it would have to be done by going to court with the builder or the previous owner to correct it. And I think even they would argue that the city inspected and approved it. So I believe it does meet the unnecessary hardship condition.
And this is Chairperson Hare. Does anybody else have any comment regarding condition 3?
This is Board Member Wisner. My only comment on this one, and I guess maybe I need some clarification from staff, but because the covered deck is attached to the house, I mean, I guess the remedy to me, wouldn't that potentially have an impact on I mean, I'm not an architect or an engineer, but obviously that affects the I don't want to say the integrity of the house, but if it's connected to the house and it looks like the peak kind of goes over into the house, that could potentially be a issue too. That's, to me, would qualify as an unnecessary hardship if the resolution is to remove the cover for the deck.
And this is Chairperson Herod. I want to, and I believe that Board Member Wisner's comments are well taken. I want to circle back a little bit to what Board Member Gardner was saying about the unnecessary hardship portion of number 3, of condition 3. And I want to preface that by saying, after having worked with Catherine for 2 years, I want her to know that I've been listening, and that I feel like I read the land development code more closely now, and I take more seriously, or hopefully as seriously as she wants me to, what I as a board member can and can't do under the code. And I believe that staff's analysis is correct, that mere financial loss or the loss of a potential financial advantage does not constitute an unnecessary hardship. But that's not really the piece that I'm looking at. I think that is still attenuated at this point. Were we to consider it, where the financial hardship piece would come in is, Mr. Turner is here, and he would now, this board meeting right here is an open public board meeting. We're being broadcast to the world right now. He would potentially put himself in great legal jeopardy if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, he's moving out and he doesn't advise the incoming buyer, hey, by the way, this property's not in compliance, with zoning, and the only cure is to either separate it from the house or rip off 5 feet of the front of your deck. And if this deck ever becomes, needs repair over time, the city isn't going to grant you a permit to repair it as is, and he would suffer a financial loss at that time. But I said I was looking at something else in condition 3, which is I see an unnecessary hardship in what I think is an arbitrary and capricious interference with the basic right of a private property owner. And where I get there is we have evidence in front of us this evening of a non-conforming property. We do. But we also have evidence in front of us that we have a bad actor, builder or developer that wasn't properly supervised or regulated while this property was being built. Then we may have a bad actor homeowner who actually asked that developer to build this and may even have had knowledge that the property was being constructed in a way that was not compliant with its zoning, and then sold that property with that knowledge to Mr. Turner. We also have a failure regarding the final building inspection by the city, and then the issuing of an official certificate of occupancy by the city. And what we've got now is this issue has been brought to light, and we understand it, and we can look at it and see what the problem is. And we have some other people that at this point have been able to walk away from this thing. We have the builders been able to walk, the first owner's been able to walk, the city's been able to walk, and the person holding the bag is Mr. Turner. And I believe that is arbitrary and capricious. That is not what the Land Development Code was formed to do. The Land Development Code was brought to ensure, the health, safety, welfare of property and property owners in Lawrence. And we have had a failure to properly implement that code on the front end. And now the hammer is going to fall on Mr. Turner at some point. That is arbitrary, that is capricious, and that is a hardship. That's my opinion. I think that we've probably worked over item 3 pretty well. General, do you want to lead us on to item 5?
Well, I think I can feed off of part of what you said, and that is the spirit and intent of the zoning code is to protect the welfare of the community. I went to visit, look at the house. You can't even see the patio, from the front of the house. I don't imagine you can actually see it if you're, not a really tall person from the back, because he has a privacy fence. So not only does it not impact anybody, it certainly does not impact the welfare of the community. So I do not believe it's against the spirit of the code, and certainly the homeowner did not create the situation. So I think, maybe he would be successful if he went to court to achieve some kind of reasonable justice. But I can tell you, from having to go to court to right things that were wrong, I actually had a heart attack created by the stress of doing that. And I wouldn't want to put that on anybody. I think it's an unreasonable hardship in number 3. And I think the situation in a motion to approve a variance would actually be in the spirit of the code.
Thank you, Board Member Gardner. And I would follow up regarding condition 5. This is Chairperson Herod. When I look at our Land Development Code, Section 20-104, purpose, the Development Code is intended to implement the Lawrence-Douglas County Comprehensive Land Use and other applicable plans adopted by the City Commission. Skip a bit, and then here's the relevant part. In a manner that protects, enhances, promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the city of Lawrence. Once again, I have real heartburn that we have a bad actor developer launches a property into the market in Lawrence that was subsequently inspected and approved by the city of Lawrence. But now the only person in this scenario that's going to be held accountable is the present property owner who bought it with clean hands. That does not, I don't see where the present proposed use of the Land Development Code is enhancing, promoting health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Lawrence, Mr. Turner of which is a citizen of Lawrence. I don't see that. This is Chairperson Herod still, does any other board member have any other comments regarding this condition or anything else?
This is Board Member Clark. I'm just trying to think through it from the perspective of we're kind of in this gray area where that it is a patio. I believe the term a covered patio. That's not a pergola. That's not detached. So it's not quite that, but it's not quite a house either. And I was just trying to mentally walk through the situation of if this had been the dining room or something, a more permanent part of the house that was fully enclosed and fully conditioned, that had been added on in the last minute of the construction process. And I would say if the inspector was walking around the property and saw a new room, a new addition, a new part of the house that was not on the building permit or not on the plans, I think it would be on their responsibility to call that out. So I say that just as a mental exercise to think about what it would be like if it erred on the direction of it being a fully enclosed and conditioned room. So I don't really have any point other than that, but I was just thinking out loud, processing that.
Thank you, Board Member Clark and Board Member Gardner.
If there's nobody else that wants to comment or make discussion, I'd make a motion, but I don't want to do it unless everybody's gotten to speak and talk and ask questions.
Thank you, Board Member Gardner. This is Chairperson Harrod. Does anybody else on the board have any? Oh, Board Member Shalinski, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Board Member Clark's observation is apropos in the sense that this came to the owner's attention because he was interested in enclosing the space. And if that is the intention, I guess I would ask of the staff whether that would need to come before this board for a variance. In other words, personally, I could see, because of the equities that have been pointed out, the appropriateness of granting a variance to continue the current use and configuration of the property. Whereas if I was faced with a decision of, is it okay to enclose something within this footprint, coming to a different conclusion?
Barry, Board Member Gardner, if I put a condition on it that they could not enclose it, would that meet your needs?
Yeah, I think it would.
This is Board Member Clark. Yeah, I don't think we could.
Yeah, that issue isn't before us tonight. That would be a separate and distinct issue, and would need to be, he would need to bring his plan to the city, and they would either administratively issue a permit or not. And if they didn't, he would be free to appeal, enclosing that back space there. I mean, looking at the overhead that was provided for us by staff really depends on how far out that space pushes from the back of the house, whether they would come back here or not. That's my opinion. But I don't believe that issue is properly before us tonight. The issue before us is he has a deck, it's attached to the house, it's considered an attached structure, and it's pushing out 5 feet into the rear setback, and it's not allowed by current zoning. That's the issue that's before us.
I have one question.
I think Catherine Week has a
Sorry.
for us.
Yeah, I was just going to try to answer the questions that kind of floated out there. And you're absolutely right, the way you explained it, Travis Harrod. If it were enclosed, it would be treated the same. And when staff, writes these staff reports, we try to be consistent throughout in how we analyze these. And when we bring them before you, it is one element. You all are, as you are doing now, that you're tasked with analyzing each criteria. And I just want to point out that the arbitrary and capricious nature is specifically called out in the definition of unnecessary hardship. And so if that's where you're going, in the arbitrary and capricious nature of finding this to be the unnecessary hardship criteria for the uncovered patio as it is now, or unenclosed, that would apply as well if they chose to enclose it. So either way, granting the variance would, if you go that route, would give them the opportunity to utilize it as part of the primary structure, which is how it is being used and viewed now when we analyze it. It is part of the primary structure. It doesn't matter whether it is unenclosed or enclosed. So you are analyzing it in the appropriate manner for the definition of unnecessary hardship. So,
Mr. Chairperson here. Thank you, Catherine. Board Member Gardner.
Question for Catherine. In the beginning paragraph of item number 2, I need a clarification because it says the request is for a variance from section 2601A, reducing the required rear setback for a lot RS7 zoning district from 30 to 25.5 feet for an existing detached dwelling. And this is not detached.
the use on the lot is a residential detached dwelling. The whole structure, that use title is called a detached dwelling. So we're not saying that the porch is detached or the roof structure is detached. We're saying that under the use classification in this zoning district, a house or a residential property is called a detached dwelling. So it's not relating to the porch. It's relating to the use.
And this is Chairperson Herron. I think another way to say it is it's being used, detached dwelling is being used as a term of art within the code as opposed to its literal definition. Is that right, Catherine?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a classification, yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure I can get the motion right, but I would move that the board approve a variance to the rear setback from 30 to 25.5 feet with the finding, with the board finding that it meets all 5 conditions
And
of the land development code. Sorry.
Mr. Chairperson Herron, and I have Board Member Clark's hand is up.
Yeah, this is Board Member Clark, and on these issues where we're kind of gray, we have erred on making motions too quickly in the past, and it has nipped us in the bud.
Okay.
So I would not recommend, at this point, I would recommend that we not second that motion until maybe we have a feel of the room that that things are going, that we don't want to have more discussion and we don't vote prematurely.
Sure. Okay. Board Member Falvey.
Staff member Catherine, can we get some clarification? We've kind of talked around the subject. So if we issue the variance for this property, you're saying that currently it's functioning as part of the primary structure. So if they came back and wanted to enclose the space, would they have to come for another variance from us?
Staff Liaison Catherine Week, no, they would not. So they would be able to enclose it, which is what their intent is anyway, to enclose it and utilize that as conditioned space. Yep.
Thank you.
This is Chairperson Herron. Is there any other board member that has a question or discussion?
I think this is Board Member Clark, and while I do think this is unfortunate, I've seen everyone's perspectives thus far on, someone being caught as holding the, being the last man standing, getting the hammer to fall on him. I have a hard time applying the criteria of everyone being, we're using this so that everyone can develop equally. And I think that there are alternatives that would in my mind, not constitute a hardship or meet some of the other criteria that I think could be pursued in such a way that does not require us granting a variance for this property.
And this is Chairperson Herron, and I think Board Member Clark's comments are well taken. Here's the distinguishing element for me, which is we strongly presume that this GIS photo provided to us by staff and acknowledged by Staff Member Weeks was taken at the time that even possibly before this property was fully complete. Like this is a photo of it as this property was built. And so then we can presume some things, which is the builder, possibly with the knowledge of the owner, attached this non-conforming space to the back of the house, clearly, contrary to and in variance to the site plan that was approved by the city. So if there was evidence before us that, in 2015, 2016, 2017, sometime afterwards, this thing was attached, my analysis might be different. But in fact, my analysis would very likely be different, because at that point, we would have a structure that was attached, no permits were pulled, so we know that somebody is up to something, and possibly the only recourse would be for Mr. Turner to go and sue the seller if the statute of limitation hasn't run. But in this case, we have an interceding event, which is the city of Lawrence stepped in, inspected this property as per the code and the law, and then subsequent to that inspection issued an official occupancy certificate. And so now they have entered into this fray, and it is not equitable for the city to have failed in their duties to properly enforce and regulate our land development code, but then be held harmless and force the burden onto the current property owner. That's where I sit in this. And that's why I would oppose. That's why I would oppose staff's recommendation. Board Member Clark, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Board Member Clark. Just as a thought experiment, then in response to that would be, I believe the standard for outlets in a house is you need to have one every 12 feet. Every vertical 12 feet, you need to have an outlet in your home. And if an inspector, I could see a place in which an inspector might miss an outlet that is 13 feet apart from another outlet, and they grant the occupancy, and the owner occupies that home for 10, 12 years or something like that. However, it's been 8 years, I guess, in this case. And then a separate owner, it's cleared multiple real estate transactions, multiple inspections. A separate owner makes a decision to remodel that room in a substantial way and files for a building permit. And the building permit is to remodel a wall and then, I don't know, do something minor. I don't know, but it requires a permit. And that gets inspected years later by the person that granted the building permit. And although they're inspecting that, they happen to notice that in that room that had that construction, an outlet was non-compliant, and it technically was that room. So they would turn to the person and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I can't approve the electrical inspection in this room because that outlet is 13 feet there. I need you to bring that into code compliance." And so then I would consider that reasonable, to that it was something that was missed maybe once, but not missed by another inspection at a later point in time. And so then in my mind, the only difference between the electrical outlet on a wall and the attached patio in this instance is the number of zeros behind the cost associated with that. And while it's inconvenient and sad, I would expect that we're trying to move the city towards compliance in all areas, and not granting variances for mistakes in the past.
And this is Chairperson Harrod, and I think that it's good that Board Member Clark forces us to really step up and defend our analysis. In this case, I think that it's distinguishable once again, where city inspector goes in for the final building inspection, looks around, and misses, that an outlet is 12 inches farther apart than it should be under code. And later on, there's a cost associated with that when an electrical permit can't be issued and some remediation has to occur. One, the price tag of that remediation is not, I think, going to be as significant as bringing this into compliance. And second, we're talking about a whole house full of outlets, and one or two outlets are off by 12 inches. Once again, not conforming. In this instance, when the inspector showed up, if he had glanced down at the site plan in his hand and then looked up, there's no hiding that deck that is clearly attached to the house. I mean, he failed. You know, he walked this property, walked the inside of the property, and never noticed that, hey, what is that? I mean, there's got to be, how many square feet is that? Is that 100 to 200 square feet have suddenly been tacked on to the outside of the house? I mean, it sticks out like this. You can't miss it. So, I mean, there is a total failure of the city to spot this and enforce it at a time that was appropriate to enforce, because the city could have withheld that certificate of occupancy, and then everybody would have looked right back at the builder and said, you're going to eat this. You did this. Now you make it right. And that's exactly how the code's supposed to work. But instead, we are now 8 years down the line, and we got a guy with clean hands, in my opinion, that's going to have to eat this. And that is a hardship. That's arbitrary. That's capricious. And it's also, I don't believe it's in the spirit of our land development code that this situation should arise. Does anybody else have anything? Board Member Falvey.
I'd like to ask another, Board Member Falvey, I'd like to ask staff a question. Do we know when the occupancy permit was issued, and if this was done before or after that? I know it's hard to tell from the aerial and when the permit was issued, but having some more clearer timeline would be helpful.
I don't have that directly in front of me. I can scan the staff report. I apologize. Luke is not with us tonight because he had an emergency, but I did not see that in his staff report this evening. But if you give me a minute, I can see if I can get into our permit system and check to see when the final inspection, if the date is in there.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
This is Board Member Clark addressing Board Member Falvey's question. There's one of the pictures that was in the packet showed grading around the house with the roof over it, and I just, based on personal experience, I'm like high 90 percentile confidence that was in place before the building permit was finalized and that occupancy permit was granted. So I'm guessing in a development like this, they probably would have had grass on the ground before they even sold it. So, for whatever that's worth.
I can't log in.
I can't either.
Yeah, we apparently cannot log into our permit system from this room at the moment, so I cannot check that date to see exactly when the final inspection or certificate of occupancy was done. So,
Board Member Falvey, that's okay. Thank you. I tend to side with Board Member Clark's analysis, and it is unfortunate that this is coming before us, but it's our duty to, review properties as they exist. And I tend to agree with staff's analysis.
This is Chairperson Herod, Catherine Weeks.
yeah, I do just want to say, when you're considering your analysis, staff can only bring before you what we have, like the information, the fact, and as Commissioner or Board Member Herod has pointed out, there are a lot of assumptions that we're making as far as when the actual roof went on for the covered patio and if it was before or after final occupancy or final inspection. And so when staff does craft the staff reports, we can only bring before what we know that we can find. And so that is why your task is to analyze, and there could be circumstances that are created that staff just cannot bring because we don't have that information when we write the staff report. So as you're continuing to follow your analysis, just keep that in mind, that we are only presenting what we can actually find as far as facts. So,
This is Chairperson Herod. I would say this. and of course a lawyer would take time to say this, which is Catherine just used a naughty word in the law, and that's the word assumption, which means you just assume something and then you throw it out there. And I try not to do that, and I purposely use the word presume. And as used in my field, presumption is when you give the same set of facts to a similarly situated person, everybody would arrive at the same conclusion. And it's true, we don't know exactly when the final building inspection happened on this property or when the occupancy certificate was made. But I mean, on this point, even board member Clark agrees that this picture is probably before the certificate of occupancy was issued. And so I would say we can presume that this structure was built contemporaneous, at the time that this property was built, and probably, I presume that the builder knew exactly what was going on when he did it. Because they got lots of tape measures and they use them all the time. So, 5.5 feet, that's shooting pretty wide of the mark, considering they had this thing staked off originally for this first site plan, and then it just grew a little bit. And how that happened, we don't quite know. So there that is. Does anybody else, this is Chairperson Harrod still, does anybody else have any comment or argument, persuasion, anything? Board Member Clark.
This is Board Member Clark, and I would like to give a shout out to the applicant for bringing this before us tonight and doing it the right way. Like, legit appreciation for trying to write this the right way.
Absolutely, I agree. This is Chairperson Harrod. Does any board member have any further discussion, any questions? Anybody want to make a motion and see where it goes? All right, Board Member Clark.
Board Member Clark, recommending that we might just pull the room lightly before we make a motion.
Sure. Okay, we can do that. Why not? And what would you like? What for poll question would you like to ask? Because how you ask the question is important.
This is Chairman, Board Member Clark. I leave that to the wisdom of our chair.
Okay, I would put. Here's one way to structure the question. Should the applicant suffer from a failure of the city to properly inspect and issue an owner's certificate? But that wouldn't be quite fair. We'd be kind of loading the back end of the question there. I think, in all candor, what Board Member Clark wants to know is how we all fall on this issue. I would volunteer. I think you all know. I would vote against the staff recommendation. I think Board Member Gardner would vote against the staff recommendation. So I think we know that Board Members Falvey and Board Members Clark would approve the staff recommendation. And so that means we have 3, I think, unknowns out there right now. Would board members Wisner, Shalinsky, and Rankin, you guys want to let us know where you are so we can structure a motion properly when the time comes?
This is Board Member Wisner. I'm of the opinion that they do meet the 5 criteria, and I would be supportive of Board Member Gardner's motion that has not received a second yet.
All right, so that's 3 opposing staff recommendation, 2-4. So we have Board Members Shalinsky and Board Member Rankin.
This is Board Member Shalinsky, and I would be inclined to tie it up here.
All right, so it's 3-all. Board Member Rankin, you, the junior member, are now, you are the swing vote.
You're on the hot seat.
All right. Board Member Rankin, Adam Rankin. Initially, I was going to be approving the staff recommendation, but kind of now knowing all the facts and getting everything, I think I got to go against it.
All right, then if I've counted correctly, then what, we have 4 opposing staff recommendation and 3 in support of the staff recommendation. Is that right?
Yeah, it's probably, Catherine Weeks, it's probably better to word it as in support of the variance request
Support of the variance. Yeah,
instead of
thank you.
opposing staff, because we're just giving you a staff opinion, so yeah,
I
and a
know,
recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Once
You
again-
noticed how I said that? I said I support the 5
I know.
conditions.
I did notice that, thank you.
Leave it to an
I
attorney
did.
to
I
think
did
of things
one
in terms of
time. I did something
opposing.
right.
Okay, so I think we have a sense then of how the board is going to vote, and so thusly I think that we can craft the correct motion, and maybe even one of our esteemed elder members like board members Clark or Weisner, Shalinsky, anybody could jump
Oh,
in.
I made a motion.
Yeah, there is a motion on the floor.
Oh.
I'm sorry, staff member Week, there's still a motion on the floor, so.
Okay, well, we can go ahead and revisit that motion then if everybody likes.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, so
Board member Weisner, second. Sorry.
all right, so this is Chairperson Herod. Catherine, do you need any amplification or anything of Board Member Gardner's motion on this issue?
This is Staff Liaison Catherine Week. The way he worded the motion was exactly as it was worded in the recommendation or the blurb for the variance request, and his motion was to vote in favor of the variance. So unless one of the board members needs clarification, I think staff is ready to take a vote.
I was probably the only one that needed clarification there, so I'm glad that I could get it obliquely. All right, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the applicant's variance on this issue. I would ask staff to call the roll.
Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Clark.
Aye.
Falvey.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Herod.
Aye.
Rankin.
Aye.
Shalinsky.
No.
And Weisner.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
I just wanted to thank Nate for slowing me down. Okay. I do get in a hurry. I got my second COVID shot yesterday. I feel like the pits, and I was ready to go to sleep. So thank you very much. You did a good job.
Yes, this is Chairperson Herod. Thank you all for the great analysis and discussion. Absolutely. I think we're at that point of the agenda, miscellaneous. Is that right?
Staff Liaison Catherine Week, yes. I was just pulling the agenda back up. I do not believe we have any miscellaneous items for you this evening.
All right. Well, if there's no miscellaneous items and nothing's coming off the floor, then I think we would be moving to adjournment of our meeting tonight.
Board member Gardner, one question. Do we have one for next month?
At this point in time, not that I'm aware. However, the deadline for submittals is tomorrow at 3 p.m. So unless something comes in. Yeah.
Outstanding. All right. Well, I'd be looking for a motion then.
Motion to adjourn, Board member Gardner.
Is there a second?
Board Member Clark, second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Would staff please call the roll?
Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Clark.
Aye.
Falvey.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Herod.
Aye.
Rankin.
Aye.
Shalinsky.
Aye.
Weisner.
Aye.
Motion adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, everybody. We'll see.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman.